Okay, let's begin today looking at the evolution of social behavior. Okay, so how organisms interact with each other socially, and how that manner of interaction, how they behave as they interact within their various ecosystems. Okay, so how does that behavior come about? So the first thing we'll begin by asking ourselves exactly what is social behavior. So social behavior refers to the ways in which either animals or other organisms interact with the members of their own species. Okay, so how do they interact with the members that belong to their own species? So the way in which they interact with each other, with each particular member of their species, that is now what underlines the meaning of social behavior. So the interactions between different members of the particular species in question can either have positive, negative, or neutral effects. Okay, so how they interact, they might help each other. That's a positive impact. They might derive benefit but harm other members of that particular species in return. So that will be a negative impact to those that are deriving harm or that are suffering harm as a result of that interaction. But at times, that interaction might not have any effect on either. So then such an interaction is deemed to be neutral. So mostly, this interaction might influence survival. So how best members of that particular species survive. That interaction might also influence how they reproduce, and it might as well affect the overall fitness of the particular members of that particular species in question. So that means then that social behavior, because it influences survival, reproduction, and the overall fitness for the particular members of the species, then social behavior plays a key role in evolution. So, as you might have seen, animals or organisms will form groups, either for temporary gain or will live permanently together in social structures, or they might only interact during some very key events in their life, for example, mating. So these interactions are now what we want to dive in deeper. So in a way then, when we explore the social behavior among organisms, then it will help us to have a proper ability to explain why, for example, animals or organisms cooperate, why they help each other, and sometimes why they compete. Because at times they cooperate. When they are cooperating, they are not competing, but they are helping each other in the process. But at times, now they have to come up and try to get what they want. That's now competition. So by understanding how this behavior has developed in animals, that will help us also to understand why we as humans have developed such a complex society. Because the way we interact in society is full of complexities. Okay? Our social behavior as human beings is extremely tied with the complexities. And the way to understand how these complexities have developed. The best way to understand how it has developed is by studying the social behavior in other animals. Then now we can extend it to the human example, so the human situation. So how does social behavior evolve? Okay. So for it to evolve, for it to change, then that behavior must, in a way, increase the fitness of an animal. So the fitness here refers to the ability of that animal to survive and produce offsprings. So that's the fitness. So for any social behavior to evolve, it should have an effect. It should have an ability to increase, to enhance the ability of a particular organism or animal to survive longer and attain maturity, that's the reproductive maturity, so that it can now leave offsprings. As we saw, natural selection is likely to favor behaviors that provide either direct or indirect benefits to an individual's genetic success. So an individual's genetic success is the ability to pass the genes to the next generation, which means the ability for a particular organism to survive until reproductive maturity, find a mate, and produce an offspring, then take care of that offspring. Okay. So natural selection will favor behaviors that enhance the ability of a particular organism to survive longer until it attains reproductive maturity, then produce offsprings as a result. So, some acts which might appear to be very selfless, okay? So things that are extremely selfless, they might evolve only if they increase the survival of relatives who share common genes. So in that case, that act is evolving. That act is not benefiting an individual, but is possibly benefiting other individuals that are related to an individual who has or who is practicing that act. So that's why we are saying even some of these seemingly selfless acts can evolve if they increase the survival of relatives who share common genes. So in that case, it's not about an individual being selfish to think about his own genes. Remember, we talked of members of a particular species. So when you ensure the survival of members of that particular species, then you are enhancing the survival of genes from a common pool. Okay? Because it is you and members of your species, relatives, because you share common genes. So there are types of social interactions, and one of it is mutualism. So in mutualism, both organisms that are interacting benefit. Both organisms that are interacting, they both benefit. So the example we give here is, for example, if you have a group of lions that are hunting in groups, as they are doing the hunting in groups, it increases their ability to catch larger prey. So things like zebras, for example, things like buffaloes. So it will have been impossible for the lions to catch this large prey had they gone hunting alone. But they have an enhanced ability because They are now out there hunting as a group. They are working as a group. So that type of interaction is mutualism, because both of them now benefit by accessing more food. Okay? So the hunting success rate has increased because they were out there doing the work in groups. Another example, we have an organism which eats parasites of another species of the same organism. So the cleaner fish will eat parasites from larger fish. That's a relationship where the cleaner fish is eating parasites from a larger fish. The cleaner fish is getting food, while the larger fish is benefiting by staying healthy because the parasites have been removed from its body. So in mutualism, both the organisms involved are benefiting. We've given two examples where lions are hunting in groups. What is the benefit? They can now be able to catch bigger prey, things like zebras, buffaloes. It will be impossible, for example, for just one lion to catch a buffalo. But when they are out there hunting in groups, it enhances, it increases the success rate of their bringing down the buffalo. By doing that, based on the size of the buffalo, then the lions in that particular group now have a higher, they gain access to more food. Okay? So compared to the solo efforts, the efforts of each individual lions, they could not be able to catch. Each of the lions on its own might not be able to catch a buffalo. But you bring together a group of lions, then they have a higher chance of killing a buffalo. By killing a buffalo, it's more food that the lions can now access. Another example we've given for the mutualism as a type of social interaction is where you have two types of fish. One is the cleaner fish, which eats off parasites from a larger fish. So there is a fish that is cleaning the other. So the fish which is eating parasites is getting food. But the fish from which parasites are being removed will stay healthier because there are no more parasites to keep inflicting harm to it. So those two examples exemplify how both organisms involved in this type of social interaction, which we call mutualism, are both benefiting. Let's move on. So the second type of social interaction is altruism. Okay? So in altruism, because there are two organisms that are interacting. But in altruism, one is helping and one is paying a cost. Okay? So let's look at the example that we give, then we go ahead and explain it. So think of there are certain organisms in the field, animals moving around in the field. Then there is spot predators. Once they spot the predators, if one of the animals makes some noise to alert the others that there are predators within the vicinity, the animal that has made that call, has made that noise, it risks because now the predator is likely to hear where the noise came from. Then that animal can be noticed. But now it helps others because the others are warned of the presence of predators. Okay? So in that case, it is helping others, but it is likely to pay a cost because of its help that it has offered to others. So that is altruism. So altruistic behaviors, which include, for example, the alarm calling, so that you sensitize your kins that there is danger in the vicinity. You end up protecting your relatives so that they can help to pass on the shared genes. Okay? So you are risking the predators might come and catch you if you are the animal which made that alarm. But because you are moving around with your kins, you are moving around with your relatives, even through the altruistic behavior, by making noise, the predator might spot you. Then you are likely to be killed by the predator. But the benefit is you have saved, you have protected your relatives. So by protecting your relatives, you increase chances that your relatives will pass on the genes that you share. Okay? So that is an example of altruism, where you pay a cost, but in the process, you also help. Okay. The next type of social interaction is selfishness. In selfishness, these are type of social interaction where one is benefiting and the other is losing. Okay, so there are these are interaction between organisms. And as that interaction happens, one organism is benefiting, the other organism is losing. So that is selfishness. Selfishness. So one benefits, one loses. So in selfishness, the example we give here, if, for example, there is a lion which is taking over a new pride, so it's likely to kill the cubs of the previous male. Okay? So the lion is interested in taking over the new pride. But what does it do? It kills wale watoto wenye hiyo simba mwanamke alikuwa amezaa na the previous male. So by eliminating these unrelated cubs, the new male lion then forces the females to mate with him, ensuring that his genes, not the rivals, but his genes are passed on. Pure selfishness. Okay, pure selfishness. So this is a male lion which comes into a female lion which has several cubs. But so as to enhance chances that the female cub will mate with him, the lion kills the cubs of the previous male lion. So it is not related, possibly, to the lion which fathered those cubs. So it is eliminating them. They are unrelated to him, to this lion, male lion. Okay, so by doing that, then when the female eventually mates with this new male lion, then it is the genes of the new male lion that will be in the cubs, the new brood of cubs that will be brought forth. Pure selfishness, because it is doing away with the rival's genes, but enhances its own genes. Okay. The other example here is the cuckoo birds. So these birds can lay eggs in the nests of other birds. So when it does that, then the birds whose nests this bird has gone to lay eggs in, those birds will end up helping to sleep on the eggs until they hatch. Then once the eggs have hatched, they will end up raising the cuckoo chicks. Okay, so the cuckoo is benefiting, but the other bird in the net is losing out. Selfishness. Okay, so how is the cuckoo benefiting? The cuckoo is benefiting by avoiding the costs of parenting, while the host bird, the bird in whose nest the cuckoo bird laid eggs, will lose because it is using resources to raise a chick that does not belong to them. So it's a form of social interaction, it's a type of social interaction, selfishness. One is benefiting, the other one is losing. The other type of social interaction is, we call it spite. Under this type of social interaction, both the organisms that are interacting, they both lose. The example here is, imagine of there being bacteria which produces toxins to kill both themselves and any other competing strain. So it is producing a toxin not just to kill the competitor, but also to kill itself. So the explanation here, remember we talked about the act of selflessness, which might endanger an individual but enhance the survival of relatives. So the explanation for spite is that although the bacteria which is producing the toxin might die, their genetic relatives in the neighborhood will benefit by facing fewer competitors. Okay? So such a behavior can persist through indirect fitness. Direct fitness is when an organism enhances its own survival until reproductive maturity, then it reproduces. But indirect fitness is when an organism enhances the fitness of another organism, not itself. So in this case, the bacteria is killing itself together with competitors so that its genetic relatives within the neighborhood may benefit because there is a reduction now in the competitors. Okay? So at times, there are, within the primate social order, we have the dominant individuals and the subordinates. So some of these subordinates might disrupt matings between dominant individuals. Okay? So by disrupting that mating, the subordinate does not benefit. The subordinate is the disruptor. So it is not disrupting the mating so that it can also mate. It can't, because the dominant individuals are in a higher social order compared to the subordinates. But the subordinate is just disrupting that mating. Both of them are losing. That is spite. Okay? So by doing that, because it has disrupted the mating of the dominant individuals, in a way it has now prevented the rival's success And by doing that, by preventing the success of its rivals, it might indirectly help the disruptor or their relatives to secure the future opportunities. Okay? So spite zote zinapoteza. Okay? Spite zote zinapoteza. So those are the 4 types of social interaction. But why is it that organisms find it proper to help others? So one of the reasons, for example, if someone told you now that your brother is sick or your brother is having this and this challenge, you will want to step in because one of the reasons is you want to help family. So that is kin selection. The example given here is the worker bees. So the worker bees, they sacrifice their ability to reproduce, but instead they care for their queen's offspring. So they are helping, they are working, they are more closely related to their so they sacrifice their own ability to reproduce, but instead they help offering care to offsprings for their queen within that particular structure of the bees. Okay, so the worker bees will be more closely related to their own siblings if they, okay. So instead now they choose to help take care of the queen's offspring. So by doing that, they are helping to spread their shared genes. Because remember, they share genes with the queen, whom they are helping to take care of its siblings. Okay. So by helping the queen, by raising the queen's offspring, in essence, they also end up helping to spread the genes that they share, the genes that are common between the worker bees and this other queen. So there is spreading of the shared genes in that case. So one of the reasons is you want to help family. So if your brother or your sister died, God forbid, most people will want to take care kwa watoto wake. Why? Because you still want the genes za dada yako ama za ndugu yako zile ziko ndani ya mtoto ziendelee, okay, so that they can be spread. So you have more connection to that child because you are related, because you share genes with that person. Most people will go visit an orphanage, but they will not want, for example, to take children of their brother or their sister to the orphanage. They will want to offer their best care to those children because they want to help their family. In doing that, you are helping to spread the genes that you share. So the second reason is what we call the reciprocal altruism. So you help now to get help later. Okay. It's the same thing that we do as when our parents help us now. The expectation is in old age, we should now be there to do what? To reciprocate, to help them in return. Okay. So in baboons, the olive baboons, they have alliances, and those alliances, within those alliances that they formed, they help each other to win mates and fend off rivals. So inamaanisha, a member of that alliance, akiona mate, other members will help that particular individual to win that mate, then fending and ensure that the rivals are not in any way able to access the rival. Remember, not all of them might win a mate at a common time. So moja itapata mate leo, waisaidie iwin leo, na ingine itapata next week. So venye hii imesaidia leo, imesaidiwa leo, itasaidia next week. Ile imesaidia leo, itasaidiwa next week. Okay? So you help so that you can also get help later. The third reason why we help others is helping for group survival or group selection. So think of ants which sacrifice themselves so that they can protect their colony from threats. Okay? For people who have dug an ant hill, when you are getting closer, okay, when you are getting very close to where their queen lives, the ants become extremely fierce. Okay? So what they are doing is they are trying to protect their colony against threats. But in so doing, they endanger themselves, they sacrifice themselves. So what they are doing is that even if they are dying as individuals, but they are dying in line of offering sacrifice for the sake of protecting their groups. And because members of that particular colony, members of that particular group will be having shared genes because they have common origin at some point, they are closely related. So by sacrificing their lives so that even if they die, what they are doing is they are helping indirectly to preserve shared genes. Okay? So those are the three reasons why organisms can opt to help others. Okay? They can opt to help others. So there are social strategies, or what is called the game theory. So understanding these social strategies or understanding this game theory helps us to have a better appreciation of how animals make decisions when their success depends on what others do. Okay? So the strategies that they employ, what is it that informs their decision? Okay? How do they end up deciding on what to do? When especially their success, their ability to be successful depends on the acts of others. So the game theory also explains how certain strategies evolve and persist within populations. So in most of the life situations, our day-to-day experiences, we are faced with choices. One, should you cooperate with whoever you are interacting with? Should you compete with whoever you are interacting with? Or do you want to avoid that interaction, avoid that conflict? Okay. So for you to make that decision, to make that choice, whether you want to cooperate, to compete, or even if you want to avoid that conflict, it all depends with the costs and benefits of each option. So if the costs, for example, of cooperating are more than the benefits, then you choose what is more beneficial. If the benefits of competing are more than the costs, you choose what is more beneficial. If you think that by avoiding this conflict, I benefit more, then you choose the most beneficial way. Okay? So it then means each of the options that we take will determine which behaviors that are favored by natural selection. So if we are to benefit more, then that is what is likely to be favored by natural selection. Because natural selection is about an increase, okay? An increase, an ability to survive. So by an organism surviving, it will have benefited. So if the benefits for survival are more than the costs, then natural selection is likely to favor that choice. So an important concept in the game theory is the evolutionarily stable strategy, what is abbreviated as ESS. So ESS is a strategy that if most individuals in a population adopt it, then it cannot be beaten by any other alternative strategy. Okay? So it means it is a strategy that resists inversion by any other strategy. So it will be the best strategy for that particular population. Okay. So the ESS, the evolutionarily stable strategy, is the best strategy that a particular population can adapt. And once it has adapted that evolutionarily stable strategy, that strategy cannot be, there cannot be any other better strategy that that particular population can do what? Can adopt. So it is evolutionarily stable because it withstands evolution for a long time. So let's break down the game's theory a bit more. So there is what we call the hawk-dove game, where you imagine there are two animals which are competing for a resource. Okay? So a hawk, mnajua hii ya kushika kuku, kushika vifaranga na kuku hii kikula. Then the dove, kwa Kiswahili sijui wanaita namna gani, but is a very humble animal. It's a sign of humility. Okay? So you can imagine that if there are any two animals which are competing for a particular resource, take for example, if they are competing for food or even mates. So one is to act aggressively like a hawk would do. Okay? Hiyo ndege ikitaka kushika kuku inakuja na hizo, it becomes very aggressive. Inakuja inanyang'anya kifaranga na inaenda. Or it can act passively like the dove would do, because a dove is associated with what? Humility. So with the hawk-dove game, so there are two strategies. Either the hawk strategy, where it is now an act of aggressiveness, always fight for the resource. Okay. So if your strategy is that you always want to fight for the resource, the question is now, if the opponent, the person you are competing with for that resource, if that person fights back, then the hawk risks injury. Okay? So that's the cost. But the benefit is it might eventually do what? Access the resource. Let's look at the dove strategy. So the dove strategy is you display aggression, but you avoid fighting. Okay? So you want the resource. Indicate that you want the resource, but don't obtain the resource through fighting. Okay? So if the opponent fights, then the dove retreats because it does not want to fight. Okay? So that's the first thing. For the dove strategy, you want the resource, but you don't want to obtain the resource by force through fighting. So in that case, once the opponent fights back, the dove retreats. But if the opponent is also a dove, in that case, meaning it will not want to fight back, then now what happens is they share the resource. Okay? So there is two organisms here with different levels of aggression and different strategies. The hawk strategy, I want this resource irrespective. So I come for the resource and I fight for it. If you want to fight back, then we'll fight. But the benefit is I might get the resource, but the cost is I might get injury. In the second case, there is an animal having the dove strategy. I need this resource, but I'm not fighting. So if I come for the resource, and whoever it is that we are competing with over that particular resource, if that my competitor fights back, then I retreat. Okay? So the cost is, by it retreating, I don't get the resource. But the benefit, I don't get injured. But now, if the opponent is also having a strategy like mine, then we end up doing what? Sharing that resource. So we cooperate, we share the resource. So the possible outcomes of that situation are, if the hawk encounters an equivalent, okay, in its desire to access the particular resource that it wants, then they will fight. One will win, the other one will get injured. By injury, that is a high cost, because the extent of the injury, it might even reduce the ability of that injured hawk to survive. So that is a very high cost to pay. In the case of a hawk versus a dove, the hawk is likely to win the resource without a fight. Because remember, the hawk wants the resource, even if it means fighting for it, it wants it. But the dove wants the resource, but it cannot fight. So it means the hawk will take it without fighting, because the dove is not fighting for it. Okay, in the case of a dove versus a dove, they will end up sharing the resource, which is a good thing. But equally, they are avoiding the cost of fighting. What is the cost of fighting? Injury. And even fighting in itself, inatumia nguvu ndio pigani. So the dove versus dove scenario, the resource is shared, no injury, no waste of energy in fighting. So the cost of fighting is avoided. But both of them now do what? End up benefiting from the resource. So the best strategy depends on the relative costs of fighting versus the value of the resource. So how much energy, for example, do you need to fight your competitor? And what is the level of risk that you might get injured, and to what level or to what degree might you get injured in the process of fighting? That's now the cost of fighting. You will lose energy and you risk being injured. Okay? But how valuable is this resource? If the resource is of a very high value, then you might be willing to lose energy and to risk injury so that you can get the resource. So if fighting is very costly, if fighting is extremely costly, then we end up now with a mix of some who want to fight and some who don't want to fight. Okay? So we have eventually balancing the aggression and the avoidance. Okay? Because the fighting is very costly. You don't want to fight all the time, but equally, you don't want to be losing out on the resource just because you are not fighting. So it's a very delicate balance where you have now to decide whether to fight for the resource or not to fight for the resource and not get it. Okay? Or to fight for the resource and possibly get injured and get the resource in return. So let's look at this real life example where there is a male deer which uses an antler displays in assessing rivals. So sometimes displays alone will determine the winner. Okay? So once the display has determined the winner, the risk of physical injury due to fighting will have been avoided. Okay? The risk of physical fighting, physical injury will have been avoided. Because once the display, by just displaying the antler, then the rivals surrender. Then a winner is determined. So there was no fighting. There is a case of the prisoner's dilemma. So that is cooperation versus defection. So in this type of dilemma, it is modeling a decision to cooperate or to betray a partner, and by doing so, it is showing how trust and betrayal can affect outcomes. Okay? So there is a decision that is supposed to be made where you have to cooperate, and by cooperating with whoever it is that you've encountered, in the extent of cooperating, you are betraying your partner. So by betraying your partner, you have now done what? Broken the trust. So it is showing now how the level of trust and betrayal will affect outcomes. So let's imagine two animals, like the vampire bats. Okay? So they can either help each other by sharing food, or they can act selfishly, where they now refuse to share. So the outcomes are possibly three. One, all of them cooperate. So by both of them cooperating, they both benefit. They get enough food, then they are able to do what? To survive. So they are both cooperating to share food. Then both of them have to share food. Then by sharing the food, they now access enough at a very little cost. They are not fighting, they are not doing anything. They are just cooperating. They are all sharing food. Okay, but if one cooperates and one defects, so the defector benefits without cost, while the cooperator loses out. Okay? So only one is cooperating, but the other one is not. Okay? So had they cooperated, that was an element of trust. But by defecting, it has betrayed this partner that they will have cooperated with. Okay, so one cooperates, one defects. The defector will benefit without cost, while the cooperator is losing out. Then now the other case is both of them defects. So when both of them are defected, then it means none of them is helping each other. So if they are not helping each other, then both may suffer. So with cooperation, it evolves if individuals interact repeatedly and if they remember those past interactions. So if they continue to interact and they remember that when we interacted this way yesterday, we had more benefits and very little cost, it will mean tomorrow they are like, when they meet again, they are likely to go the high benefit, low cost way. So that is reciprocal altruism, which says I help you now, you help me later. Okay. So the real life example in this case, you have the vampire bats, which will be sharing meals with the other mates who failed to feed, expecting the favor to be returned in the future. So the bats that have gone out there to find meals, to find blood meals, they'll come and share with their the other bats that they are sharing the roost with. So they are sharing the blood meal today with them, hoping that even if I don't get tomorrow, they will also return the favor to me. So in such a case, the bats that have been helped today need to remember tomorrow when they've gotten food that they were helped, so that they can also help back. Okay. So that is the whole idea of this aspect of cooperation. So there has to be a continuous, a repeated interaction. But then the outcome of those interactions has to be remembered by the various organisms that are interacting. Okay. There is the tit for tat strategy. So these are simple but powerful strategy in repeated games. So starting by cooperating, then you copy the opponent's last move. Okay. So we begin cooperating together, but at the end of it, what I remember more is I will remember the last thing you did to me. So this tit for tat strategy is successful because it rewards cooperation. We began by cooperating, but it also punishes betrayal. So that if you cooperate all through, I will remember your last move, which was cooperation. Then I will cooperate with you again. But if you work against my interests, I will remember that and I will do the same to you. Okay? So this strategy is successful, the tit for tat strategy. So is a repeated interaction where we begin by cooperating. Then the opponent's last move is copied. So whatever the animal, whatever the organism does to the opponent, the last move is what they will remember. Okay? So if that move is cooperation all through, then it will be rewarded by cooperation. If that move is betrayal, then it will be rewarded by betrayal. Okay. So in many social animals, like primates, for example, grooming is often exchanged. So an individual who refuses to groom others might eventually be excluded from the group. So why are they excluding this individual from the group? Because the last thing they did was betrayal by refusing to groom others. So then what do members of this particular group do? They punish that betrayal by excluding it from that particular group. Okay? What about the bystander and audience effects? So animals may change their behavior when others are watching. For example, a subordinate animal might avoid a fight in front of a dominant individual to prevent future punishment. Ni kama you want to do something but your lecturer is watching. or your father is watching, or someone whom you respect, your pastor is watching. So you are not doing it because you don't want, but you are doing it because there is someone who is watching, and if you do what you are doing, you are likely to be reprimanded for that. So hautafanya hiyo sababu ule mwenye anaangalia. Okay? So there is a bystander and there is an audience. The behavior you've adopted is not what you would have wanted to do, but you are doing it because of whoever is watching. Sababu pastor wako anaangalia. Because your boyfriend is watching, your girlfriend is watching, so you don't want to do something. Because you fear of the outcome. You fear being reprimanded as a result of what you have done. For fish, the example we give here is the male fish will adjust their aggression levels during fights, especially if the female fish are watching. Okay, so the explanation is they adjust their aggression, their levels of aggression, when they are fighting and the female fish are fighting. Supposedly, the ones which don't have high levels of aggression during fights appear to be more attractive as mates. So if the female fish were not watching, the male fish would have fought more aggressively. But so that they can appear to be not having a very high level of aggression, they adjust the aggression level ili waweze attract the females during mating. Okay? So it is an effect of the audience, what is watching, that is now what is making this fish to behave differently. Okay. So in summary, the game theory is helping us to explain why animals are choosing different social strategies. The choice of these different social strategies is on the basis of the costs involved, the benefits they are deriving, and the behavior of others. So once you know what is the cost involved in this strategy, what benefit shall I derive from this strategy, and what is the likely effect on the behavior of others from this strategy, then that can influence how you will eventually make a choice on what you want to do. Okay? So in nature, the example of cooperation, for example, you have dolphins working together to herd fish into tight corners so that it is easier for them to catch prey. So dolphins live in water, fish also live in water. So you have a group of dolphins which now begin to push fish into tighter corners so that they can now access, it's easier for them to catch the prey from those group of fish that has been herded together. So this behavior is called carousel fish feeding, where now the dolphins swim in coordinated circles so that they can force fish into some dense clusters. Once the fish are packed tightly, the dolphins can now make turns to swim through and obtain food. So you can imagine the dolphins are now surrounding the fish. So fish iko katikati. It cannot escape. Okay? All of them had this coordinated swimming and made circles around this group of fish in a dense cluster. Sasa kila dolphin inaweza toka kando iende katikati ichukue samaki ikule. Ingine itoke iende ichukue samaki ikule. Okay? So this is a type of teamwork. They had to cooperate. They had to do it together. So it's a level of cooperation, which now allows them to catch more fish than if they hunted alone. then in essence, all members of the group will now do what? Will benefit. Okay. So in this case then, why would such type of behavior evolve? Okay. So when the dolphins involved in this type of carousel feeding have a higher access to food, that increased access will boost their survival. The higher their survival, the higher the chance that they will attain reproductive maturity. Upon attaining reproductive maturity, they will have an increased reproduction success. So the cooperating dolphins are likely to get more food. By getting more food, they survive more. By surviving more, their reproductive ability, their reproductive success is also likely to do what? To increase. Then this behavior will now be favored through natural selection. Because the ones that are doing this ndio zinaishi, zinapata chakula, zinaishi, zinazaana, zinaendelea kukua within that particular population. With altruism, there is a group of dogs that will risk barking to alert others for the presence of what? Predators. So when a predator approaches, this dog may give a loud, distinctive call to warn others. But this loud call can easily draw the attention of the predators to this dog that made that noise. Sasa, because the predator imesikia penye sauti imetokea, kuna uwezekano hiyo predator iende ikule hiyo umbwa yenye imepiga kelele. Okay? But now, hiyo umbwa yenye imepiga kelele hata ikikuliwa, it will have saved the close relatives because they are together in groups. So hiyo imepiga kelele, predators zikaiona hiyo zikaifuata, lakini zingine zilipona. Okay? So it is about keen selection, helping family. Imesaidia shared genes ziendelee. Okay? So the caller will have helped to protect relatives who share many of its genes. Hata hiyo ikikuliwa na predator, but its relatives wataishi. As they pass on their genes, they are also passing genes that they share. Okay? They are passing on the genes that they share because they are closely related. So why will such an act, why will such a relationship of altruism evolve? Okay? So although the individual making the call may face the danger, ile yenye imepiga kelele, ile yenye imebweka, yenye imetoa sauti, it risks kuonwa na predators. So it might face a higher level of danger. But the survival of relatives, wale wenye itakuwa imepiga kelele, wale wengine wakasikia kwamba kuna predators wakatoroka, the survival of those relatives is helping to pass on the genes that are shared. It passes on shared genes. So the traits that are coded for by those shared genes will end up persisting in the population. Okay. In hierarchy, wolves form strict dominance hierarchies, so that through those hierarchical levels of dominance, they help in determining access either to food and mates. So by doing that, it helps to reduce constant fighting, because you know these are more dominant, these are less dominant. Okay. So then you avoid fighting. So a wolf pack, that's a group of wolves, will typically consist of an alpha pair, the dominant male and female, then their offspring, and a few lower ranking individuals. So the dominant male and female are the ones who are moving around now with their offsprings. Then there will be fewer lower ranking individuals. The alpha pair, that's the highest, that's the most dominant pair within the pack of wolves. So the establishment of this dominance is through displays of strength and submission rather than constant fighting. So sio kwamba zinapigana kila wakati, but kuelewana kwamba this is the alpha, this is the most dominant, this is a lower ranking one, is through the display of strength. So whichever displays more strength then becomes the dominant pair. Then the others just submit. So they now become a lower ranking group. So with that, they don't need to keep fighting to determine who is dominant and who is not. So because of the development of these hierarchies, there is now law and order which is maintained. Okay, so this structure helps to maintain order. And by doing that, there is efficient coordination during hunting. And with that, it now helps to limit the occurrence of these destructive conflicts. Because there have been the display of strength. So you know who is stronger, then the ones that are less stronger submit automatically. Okay, so by submitting, they will have developed the hierarchies, they will have developed the structures in there. So by that, hakuna haja ya kuendelea kupigana ndio kuweza kuweka the structures. So you avoid the constant fighting. How is that done? Dominance is created, dominance is established just by the display of strength. So the higher the strength level, dominant, that's the dominant pair. Then the remaining ones submit automatically. So that one now helps to reduce the need to fight constantly. Okay? And by doing that, it now enhances the level of coordination. And the conflicts that will have resulted, such conflicts will have led to a lot of destruction. Because fighting is expensive in terms of energy you are using and the injuries that might come from the fighting. Okay. So I've explained that hierarchies reduce the energy costs and injuries associated with frequent battles. So it makes then that the group of wolves, which we call the packs, they are more stable and successful in raising offsprings. Why are they more successful? Because they are not wasting energy in fighting. They are also not risking death or risking a reduced levels of fertility or success due to high cost injuries. So the energy they have, they use it on other things. So that increases their ability to end up raising offsprings. So by cooperating under a clear leadership structure, wolves can now end up taking down larger prey and also protecting their territory more effectively. They are not fighting amongst themselves. The structure leadership has already been established just by the display of strength and submission of the others that could not match for that strength. Then they establish that hierarchy and they yield to it. Then now they live and cooperate under that clear leadership structure. So humans show complex social behaviors, and these complex social behaviors are shaped both by biology and culture. So there are some traits like empathy, trust, and moral reasoning. These traits might evolve because they strengthen group bonds. You will want to be more to someone who is a bit empathetic. You will want to be closer and relate more with someone who is trustworthy. Okay? You want to get closer and have a stronger bond to someone who is, for example, morally upright. Then, now that is more of the biology. But now the shared rituals, storytelling, and cooperation, those are some of the things that are likely to have helped the human societies in the early times to thrive in the harsh environments. So the rituals they had, okay, the story, the cooperation, the support that they extended to each other, that is what will have helped them to survive the harsh environments in those early times. The sharing of food, for example, in hunter-gatherer societies, increased group survival, even if it will cost individuals in the short term. So if you rely on hunting and gathering, not everybody who goes out there to hunt will come home having caught any catch. So kuna wale watapata na kuna wale hawatapata. So the thing is, kama umepata leo, utakula wewe ama utasaidiana na wenzako. Okay? So it is for the hunter-gatherers, they would rather share this food so that they can help everyone in their society, ule mwenye amepata na mwenye hajapata, to survive. Because mwenye amepata leo is not a guarantee kwamba utapata kesho. But now there is a risk associated that by sharing what you've caught today, you are reducing your ability of having it tomorrow. You are giving it out with the hope that they will also get tomorrow and they give it to you in return. So the sharing in this case is increasing the survival of the group, because within the group, wewe umepata na within the group kuna wengine hawajapata. So you are helping the group to survive. But your desire to help the group survive is coming at a cost to you as an individual. When you are giving out what you have today, you are sure you will not have it tomorrow. But you are hoping that whoever you are giving it to today will have it tomorrow so that they give it back to you. Okay? So that's why we are talking of sharing food in hunter-gatherer societies increases group survival, but it extends a cost to individuals in the short term. Because uko na chakula leo jioni, you share it out, kesho asubuhi hauna. If you had not shared it out as an individual, you have it now, you'll have it even tomorrow. But now you are sharing it to other people so that you want to increase, you want to enhance the survival of the group. Okay? So another example is when you punish cheaters, people who cheat, it reinforces fairness. It prevents exploitation. And by extension now, it preserves a long-term group cooperation. Unlike if you just left people to be lying left, right, center. Because when someone lies, is subjecting someone to some unfair treatment. Okay? So if these people are punished collectively, then you are reinforcing fairness, you are preventing exploitation, and that's what the law is based on. Ukiiba, you are punished. It has to be fair. Then when that punishment is fair, it will hinder people who want to steal from stealing. So because once they steal, they exploit others. Okay, so if you end up with a society where you've punished people who steal, you've punished people who cheat, then if the punishment is fair, so that you don't punish others more than you punish another person for the same mistake, if the punishment is fair across board, then the people who are punished will end up not repeating the same mistake. And by doing that, it will prevent them from exploiting the bigger group. So once the group feels like it's not being exploited, then in long term, they can feel the need to even stay together more. Okay, so that's why we are saying punishing cheaters, it will reinforce fairness, it will prevent exploitation, and it will preserve long-term group cooperation. Because you are punishing people who wrong the community. Once you punish them, you make it, they will not want to repeat the same wrong. By not repeating the same wrong, they will not be exploiting the community. Then once the community feels not exploited, they will want to stay together even longer. Okay. So in summary, social behaviors will evolve when they increase an individual's survival, reproduction, either directly or through relatives, which is indirectly. So you saw there are cases when an organism is benefiting. There are some cases when the organism will not benefit, but so long as the relatives are benefiting. Okay? So long as the survival of an organism as an individual or its relatives and the reproduction of that organism as an individual or the propagation of the shared genes, if any behavior is aiding that, is helping to increase that, then that behavior is likely to be kept within that particular group of organisms. So cooperation, altruism, or even conflict, they all shape life. So it is an aspect of looking at what is the cost. Which cost do I have to pay so that I get the particular resource that I want? What benefit is it that I want to extract from this resource? Okay. So once you weigh those two, the cost and the benefit, then you will end up to know whether you want to fight or you want to cooperate. Okay. So it is, what is the cost of fighting, for example, and how beneficial is that resource to you? Remember, the resource is not just there. The resource is there. There are other organisms that want the resource, and you also want that resource. So the aspect of interaction in this case brings a bit of competition. So when you cooperate, you share. When you fight and they fight back, you risk losing energy in the fight, getting injured in the fight. When you fight and they don't fight back, then you get the food without fighting. But now they suffer the loss because they will not get the benefit that comes from that particular food. So looking at those three, then they help us to determine all these aspects of social behavior. So when we study these behaviors in animals, then we are able to understand how the social complexity of human societies has developed. Okay. And which pressure, from an evolutionary perspective, which pressure has been shaping our societies. Okay. So why is it, for example, when did people begin to fight? When did violence begin? What could have caused violence? Okay. So those are the type of understanding that are derived through the study of this social behavior, the interaction between organisms, as these organisms interact in a particular ecosystem. What is it that will make them fight? What is it that will make them not to fight? What is it that will make them, for example, to cooperate? Okay. So once you begin to understand that, what is it that will make them to risk their life? So when you begin to understand this, then now you are in a proper position to know when these social behaviors began and how they can change. The most important thing is that social behaviors, the behaviors of organisms, are likely to persist if they increase the survival and reproduction, either of that particular organism as an individual or indirectly by increasing the survival and reproduction of the relatives of that particular organism that we are looking at. So I hope up to that level, when you read through the notes, you will be in a position to fill in the places that I might not have captured. But in case you have a question, feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to explain it. So for now, I'll thank you and I'll look forward to engaging with you more. Thank you very much, and let's keep in touch.